Hey there, welcome back to the channel for a new god guide. This time we're covering Mercury, the Roman messenger god, but don't let that title fool you, Mercury can definitely mess people up. So let's get into the contents of the guide. First up, we'll cover Mercury's basic playstyle and what he's all about, then his abilities in depth, what they do and the best ways to use them, then items and builds where I'll discuss all the items I like for Mercury and a build example, and finally we'll close out the guide with some smaller tips and tricks to up your game on Mercury. So let's dive right in with Mercury's basic overview and playstyle. So Mercury is an assassin and definitely plays like a traditional assassin in Smite. He wants to get in, fuck shit up and get out safely. He has very high mobility and basic attack damage with the trade-off of lower ability damage than other typical assassins like Thor or Fenrir. And of course, being an assassin, he is sort of a glass cannon. Does insane damage but is also very easy to kill if you don't properly utilise his mobility to keep yourself alive, but we'll obviously cover that later in the guide. Mercury is definitely a unique take on the assassin class, and while he plays similarly in a lot of ways, he also differs enough to make him a very interesting god to play and learn. So speaking of, let's move on to Mercury's abilities in depth. So starting with his passive, this is a two-parter, but both parts are related to movement speed, which is sort of a theme with Mercury given his lore and character design. Part 1 of this passive is very simple. As Mercury, you gain 25% of your movement speed from items and abilities, but not from base movement speed, as physical power. So if you buy an item with 10% movement speed as Mercury, you will get 10% of its base movement speed, which is 381, so 30 extra speed. And of that 38, you'll get 25% or a quarter of that converted to power, which results in 9.5 extra power. Obviously, you're not going to go through calculating exactly how much extra damage you're going to get by buying a specific movement speed item in-game, but it's just a nice bonus to have given you already want to build movement speed on Mercury anyway, so having an extra 10 or 15 power on some of the items in the game can't hurt really. And the active part of this passive is that for every 1 unit travelled as Mercury, you get 0.08% bonus physical power on your next successful basic attack hit. This caps out at 40% bonus power after travelling 500 units. These numbers are sort of arbitrary, but 500 units is pretty much the distance between the two mid lane towers. 500 units is also the maximum range of Mercury's ultimate, but we'll get into that later. Also, a quick note, you won't charge this passive if you're jumping, so if you want to make the most out of Mercury, you should probably avoid jumping while you move around the map. Sad, but that's how it is. So onto Mercury's first ability, Made You Look. This is a pretty simple ranged AoE damage ability that increases in size as you rank it up. The main interesting part of this ability is that it scales from basic attack power and can crit. This used to be considered a basic attack for all purposes and would proc basic attack related item effects, but that was changed and it now triggers ability related item effects like Brawler's Beatstick for example, but won't trigger any auto attack related item effects like Golden Blade. This also has a very low cooldown which makes it perfect for clearing jungle camps especially early on and is your main form of ranged poke as Mercury. Onto Mercury's 2, Maximum Velocity. This is a pretty simple but powerful attack speed steroid. On activation, you gain 30 up to 70% attack speed based on rank, and this ability provides 2 up to 10% passive movement speed as well. There's a strange misconception that you only gain the movement speed once you activate this ability, but that's, as I said, a misconception. You get the movement speed passively forever as you rank the ability up, you don't need to activate it to get the bonus speed. So it might seem like this ability doesn't do too much just by looking at it, but the massive attack speed boost is really what enables Mercury's specific playstyle. We'll get more into this in the build section, but this ability allows Mercury to not build too much attack speed and just go more towards raw power, crit and penetration, activate this steroid and rip through people in seconds. And one final note, this ability does count towards the 25% conversion of movement speed to power from Mercury's passive. So you get 2.25 scaling up to 11.25 extra power passively from this ability as you rank it up due to that movement speed. Moving on, Mercury's 3, Special Delivery, is a medium range dash that passes through minions and jungle monsters, doing damage to them but stops at the first god you hit, picks them up, spins them around and throws them in whatever direction you are facing. So this ability is mostly supportive to the rest of your kit. The damage it does itself isn't great, especially since it will be the last ability you level, but that second or so of having the enemy being thrown gives you plenty of time to shred them with your high damage auto attacks, maybe boosted by maximum velocity as well. But this ability also does self-CC you, so be aware of that. While you're spinning the enemy god around after you hit them for that 1 second, you're completely vulnerable and can't do anything else until the animation finishes, so pay attention to other people's positionings if you're going to commit to aggressively dashing at someone. But of course this ability can just be used as an escape if you need to use it that way, or it can even help you to clear jungle camps, though its best use is definitely for that aggressive playstyle that Mercury leans towards. And a final thing, the distance you cover during this dash, which is 55 units by the way, will count towards charging up your passive for that big damage auto attack. And last but not least we have Mercury's ultimate, Sonic Boom. This is a charging dash that will increase in range the longer you charge it up for a maximum of 500 units. Which once again for reference is the distance between the two mid lane tier 1 towers. The damage, however, is the same regardless of how charged up the ability is. You won't get more damage for going max distance compared to no distance. When you activate the dash, it has a small wind up and you basically teleport to the end location. It's basically instant. And you deal damage to everyone in the line, stunning them for 1.5 seconds and spinning them around, making it so they're facing a different direction from when you hit them. And this ability will count towards charging your passive, and if you max range ult, it will full charge the passive from 0 to 100, because the max range of this ability is 500 units, and that will make your next auto attack after you ult hit extra hard, so be aware of that. You can of course fire the ability at any time during the charge process though. You don't have to fully charge it and use it at max range just to use it. You can go a very short distance just to get off the CC and damage, or full charge it to ult down an entire lane if you want to. It's really up to you and what you need in the situation. Alright, so with all of his abilities covered, let's move on to Mercury's item choices and a build example. So Mercury typically builds heavily into crit chance to make each auto attack count and utilises steroid to its best. But he also needs high physical power and some penetration as well built in. So kicking it off with starting builds for jungle Mercury, you of course need Assassin's Blessing as a jungler to help you clear and sustain when farming early on. Then you want tier 1 Katana because you're going to be grabbing Stone Cutting Sword early on in your build after your boots. And then you have 100 gold to spare for 2 potions, which for me I prefer 1 health and 1 multi-potion since Mercury doesn't use mana too much, but potion layout is really up to you. Your first item after your starting build should always be your boots. The most popular choice by far right now for Mercury is Talaria boots, mostly due to the insane movement speed they provide. Since that extra movement speed comes out to about an extra 6 power on top, you don't really lose too much for investing in Talaria instead of Warrior Tabby for example. Then after your boots, you want to go back and finish that tier 1 katana that you bought in your starting build into Stone Cutting Sword. You could argue for Hasten Katana here, but for the most part, Mercury doesn't need Hasten this early as he can outspeed most gods anyway, and the extra power and mostly the 30 penetration from Stone Cutting Sword is so much better for Mercury early on. Mercury builds quite linearly in that there's not really too much variety and room to swap in different items in his build, but here's my list of items that I pick from when I'm playing Mercury, to finish off the build after of course your boots and your Stone Cutting Sword. Rage and Deathbringer are usually my go-to crit items for Merc due to their high power and crit chance but low attack speed. I've mentioned this before, but due to his high base attack speed and insane attack speed steroid, Merc doesn't really need much attack speed in his build, so Rage and Deathbringer being just raw crit chance and power items is really good for him. These two should always be in your build in my opinion, usually in 3rd and 4th slot is where I like them. You can get other crit items like Wind Demon or maybe Poison Star for example, but for the most part these 2 items alone are enough crit for you given once Rage is stacked these give 65% crit chance combined plus the bonus crit damage from Deathbringer. Outside of crit chance, Bloodforge is a nice late game luxury item to have. I wouldn't ever build this before 5th or 6th item really in your build unless you're super far ahead, but once you have that pen and crit online you can melt people and make great use of the passive on this item. Plus the 70 power is 70 extra damage on every auto attack, which is really nice too. Titan's Bane is another late in the build item that you mainly want if you're finding yourself needing to kill tanks. That's usually not what Mercury excels at, but sometimes it's necessary, and getting a Titan's Bane in the 5th or 6th slot or selling your boots for it late game is a good shout. Hasten Katana is an option if you like that kind of run people down type of playstyle. Personally, I prefer other items for Merc since its insane movement is enough to chase people down on its own. But if you enjoy the playstyle of Hasten Katana, it's definitely not a bad item for him. Arendite is largely untested because it's very new as of making this video, but it seems to be quite strong given Mercury's tendency to ult into a fight and make good use of the passive on the item. So it's worth experimenting with in my opinion, I've been having some pretty good success with it. And finally, as a more defensive option, I like Magi's Cloak. A build of 4 to 5 damage items is usually enough for you to shred as Mercury, at which point you can free up 1 slot in your build for this item to keep you safe. Merc is a very all-in dive style of god, and that bit of extra health and CC immunity once can save your life so much for the measly 2050 gold price tag of the item. As for Jungle Mercury's relics, you want Blink and Beads always. The order you get them in depends on your personal preference and the gods in the current match, but these should always be your 2 relics. Alright, so with my item discussions done, let's finish off this section with a build example for those just looking to jump in with Mercury. Start off with Assassin's Blessing, tier 1 Katana, 1 health and 1 multi-potion, then grab Talaria boots, finish Katana into Stone Cutting Sword, then get Rage, Deathbringer, Bloodforge, sell your Blessing for Magi's Cloak, and if the game goes long enough you can trade out your boots for Titan's Bane and get the Elixir of Speed. Alright, so let's finish off this guide with a few tips and tricks to apply to your Mercury games. So firstly, when using Merc's ultimate, you always want to be aiming to just overshoot your target slightly so it lands you right next to them, and you can use that 1.5 seconds of CC from the ultimate to pummel them down with auto attacks. If you charge the ult too far, then you waste time running back towards your target after you ult, which is crucial when you're playing such a high burst DPS god like Merc. But of course, you also don't want to undershoot the ult and miss. This does take time and practice, but you can try charging the ult against a wall in jungle, then popping out into a lane and landing the ult. It can make for a nice surprise attack. Also, when using Merc's dash, try to catch people against jungle walls where you can. Since at the end of the dash you throw them away from you, if you throw them directly into a wall, they just hit against it and are in the air where you can auto-attack them the entire time. Thus you get more damage out safely than you will by throwing them away from you and having to run towards them to catch them up. Also, with Mercury's ultimate, you can often do some unorthodox ganks, for example running directly up a lane from base, charging your ult and coming from behind a tower straight into the lane for a surprise gank. Not many other junglers can do this type of playstyle, and since Mercury can't ult through or over walls, this can be similar to what Thor does. Instead of coming out of the jungle though, you'll just come straight up a lane. But that's about it from me for this one. If you did enjoy and learn something new about Mercury, then be sure to drop a like before you leave and recommend this to anyone else you think could benefit, and I'll catch you guys in another video later on. Have a great day, and peace out you nerds.